So you joined the field of cybersecurity. Now what?
Hey guys, it's Andrew back with another cybersecurity related video, and I want to give a disclaimer at the beginning of this video. If you hear a dog bark, which he definitely is gonna, don't pay it any mind. We just got a new puppy. But I just want to talk to you before the beginning of this video about something that I see a lot in the cybersecurity industry and in a lot of chat rooms and discords. I said chat rooms as if we're back in the 2000s, but a lot of discords going around the community today. It seems like there's a lot of gatekeeping of information, especially in terms of AWS, which is what this video is going to be focused on, is AWS engineering. And I just want to say that I think that when we allow gatekeeping in our community for specific services like AWS, which is a really hard service to learn, there's so many different tools and there's so many different resources that you can use within the actual AWS platform. And when you gatekeep that information from someone that's coming into a field like the one that we're in, where there's so much to learn and there's so much to be overwhelmed by, I really think that you do a disservice to the next generation of people. I really think that there's a small, minute group of people that came into cybersecurity and were immediately good at it from the beginning and didn't have one or even two mentors. I've had two. I currently have one now. And there's not a place in cybersecurity to gatekeep things, especially AWS, being a cloud tool, being such a new tool that people are trying to learn. And even in AWS, as in cybersecurity, there's over 110 resources in AWS. It's really easy to get lost in all of the fog that is AWS. And I really think it's our job as people that were taught previously by other people to then teach the next generation of people. So that's what I'm going to attempt to do in this video today. I'm going to show you a few different starting resources within AWS that you're going to need to know to get that first job interview or to act knowledgeable in that first job interview. And the goal of these videos is to go from zero to hero in AWS cloud engineering. And I hope I can accomplish that for you. Apparently clear. There's two main ways that you can go about your security career in terms of the cloud. Now, when I say cloud, that means anything like Azure, which is Microsoft's version of cloud computing, or you can do AWS, which is Amazon's version of the same thing. I imagine there's other ones, but these are the two main ones that we're going to be focusing on in this video series. And I think that a lot of the companies that you guys are going to be wanting to apply to, these are the two main ones that they're going to be focusing on. And in the spirit of how my videos usually are, I'm going to be off the cuff. So some mistakes might be made here. I'm not going to edit any of this, but we're just going to go through it and we're going to show you four or five of the main functions of Amazon Web Service, right? So when you start your first job and they're using Amazon, you might be given a you might come to a screen like this, right? They'll give you an Amazon login up top here, and let me zoom in a little bit so you guys can see this a little better. There you go. That's one of the main complaints I get in my videos is that that the console when I do Hack the Box is a little too small. So when you first started your job, you're going to be given a URL that you're going to be used to log in, right? So this is my account here. This is just a burner account that I have for one of my companies. And you're going to see in the top right here that there's regions, right? And something really specific, that was my dog, sorry. Something really specific to Amazon is that you can only have, I hope he's done. Okay. You can only have resources in regions talk to each other, right? And that's a main security feature of Amazon Web Service. Now, in terms of a more DevOps and reliability approach, that can be a bit of a nightmare when you're trying to peer your networks against each other, right? There's something, and I will elaborate this in another episode, not this one. I think it's a little too broad, but there's something called VPC peering, which basically lets your virtual private clouds talk to each other. Now, that can't happen with accounts, okay? So think of this account right here, Scythe Tech Admin, which is my company, by the way. Think of this account right here as its own specific organization, right? So in terms of an organization, you're going to have a development environment, a dev environment. You're going to have a test environment or a QA environment. You might have a prod environment, right? And I'm sorry, test and QA should be separate. So let me reiterate. You're going to have a dev environment. You're going to have a test environment. You're going to have a QA environment. And then you're going to have a production environment. Now, for someone that's completely new to any technology-based company, prod environment is going to be where your application is hosted. That's production, right? Dev environment is going to be where your engineers and your DevOps personnel are going to be testing things. I know it's pretty redundant because there's an environment called test, but dev environment is where developmental tools and developmental code are placed. Then in test, you're going to test the connectivity of the environment. QA, you're going to throw things at it. You're going to try to load test it, where you put a lot of users on the environment before something goes live to make sure that you have enough bandwidth in your environment or resources in your environment to withstand everything. So a couple different things that I'm going to be talking to you guys about today are EC2 instances, subnets, VPCs, and RDS, which is a database. So when we first go into EC2 here, EC2 is going to be the computer of your environment. I don't have any instances running in this, but if I was to do it, think of them like a virtual machine, right? So an instance is going to be its own separate computer. You can click instance here. And if you want to launch an instance, go right here. And you can see that you can choose between Linux instances. I wouldn't recommend Red Hat. They genuinely don't do a good job with pen testing and exploitation based VMs. So I would stay away from those. You could pick you can pick Windows instances, you can pick Linux instances, but for this right here, we're going to pick a Linux instance, right? So you can see here that you can give it a size. Now, there's stuff called load balancers, and there's stuff called auto-scaling groups, which we'll talk about later in this video, that help kind of counteract the size you give it. But depending on the kind of application that you're going to run, you're going to pick one of these sizes. So for this, I don't want to pay any money for it right now. And I suggest that everyone watching this video goes and does this themselves, because you can get a free tier in your Amazon account if you have Prime, I believe. So I'm going to click the Prime, or the micro there. So you can see here that it's going to automatically be inside of a VPC, right? And a VPC, you want to think of it as its own, well, first, the definition of it is virtual private cloud, right? So a good analogy I like to use for this is when you have your iCloud on your iPhone, that's its own cloud. That's your own storage. Nothing can talk to that, hopefully, unless you're Jennifer Lawrence and you're leaking your nudes. But that's its own cloud. That's essentially its own environment. Don't think of a VPC as something that you can ping, because it doesn't have an IP address for the most part, right? That's where a subnet's going to come in. Now, a subnet right here is going to be exactly what it is. It's a subnet inside a virtual private cloud, and this will have an addressable IP address, right? So if you wanted to, you could auto-assign it a public IP, and that would become pingable from the outside world. Now, just to add a caveat to that, most of Amazon's resources don't let you ping it from the outside. It's just another built-in security feature. But as pen testers and people that have been following this channel, you know there's ways around that. So that's another day's talk. Now you can give it an IAM role if you want, and an IAM is a user role, and we'll go over that in a later video. And essentially what you want to do is you want to add some storage to this. So in the mindset of thinking about this like it's just a virtual machine, a lot of you guys have probably spun up one on VirtualBox or VMware's. I think it's just VMware. That's the one I used. So here you could add extra storage. You could add an SSD if you want, or you could just have it run off a hard drive. Next, you can add tags, and that's for a future video. But if you come here to configuring a security group, this is something that's very, very important when it comes to AWS engineering, as well as just general AWS security. So you're going to see in the left bar over here, there's a lot of protocols that you're going to recognize. So we have TCP, UDP, we have SSH, SMTP, DNS, which is also UDP, HTTP, and HTTPS, along with a lot of other ones. So all this is doing is specifying that the only thing that's allowed to talk or access this EC2 instance is a host using SSH on port range 22. And then here you can specify the exact IP address that you want to talk to this. Now, the issues you're going to run into with this are if you have dynamic IP addresses, which is basically you have a different IP address every time you turn on your machine. You're going to have to create what's called a CIDR range, which is going to be the range of IP addresses that your machine could be at any moment if you turn it on. And that's a whole other thing to get into with IP addressing. And I'll definitely try to link some good resources for that in the description. But this is the lifeline of your security posture for your EC2 instance. This is so basic, but it's so good for securing an EC2, which is the lifeblood of your entire AWS infrastructure. Everything runs off of EC2s. Just like a VM in a physical data center would run all of the code, EC2s are going to run all the code and services that you want to run off that specific virtual machine. And in some cases, they could be the host of your entire application. So with that said, we're going to review and launch this. And if you guys want me to go back into security groups and go through how to have better security group posture, please let me know in the comments below. I'll be happy to make a side video about it. So if we launch this, we can create a key pair. And basically what this is specifying is if you want to SSH into this instance, you need to have this key pair, right? So you need to provide the private key in which Amazon will store the public key, and you'll be able to access this. Now, I'm not going to do this right now because I've already had this done, but that's essentially what's going to happen when you create an EC2 instance, right? Actually, I'll do it for this one because I think it teaches a lot of dark spots in our knowledge base. And I don't want anyone to come away from this feeling like they didn't learn anything and feeling like they're going to go into their next job and have those jitters of, hey, I don't know how to connect to an instance, and feeling kind of dumb about it. Because I felt super dumb about that stuff when I first started, and luckily I had a great teacher that didn't get on me about that stuff. So if you come down here into the description of our EC2 instance, you're going to see that it has a public DNS. Now this is accessible just like any other DNS would be, right? I understand that it has a different format, different syntax to it, but it's accessible, and you should treat it like that, just like any other DNS service or any other DNS that you see on the internet. Here is the public IP address, and that's a public IP. You know, people can access your instance if they get that public IP, right? But like we said before with the security groups, even if they have your public IP, and most EC2 instances, when they're running, and you're not going to start or stop an EC2 a lot, they're going to stay running for the most part. This is going to be a static IP as long as you keep your EC2 online. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. So if I wanted to go into my EC2 to upload code or just to move around like I would in any other Linux machine, right? What I would do is I go to connect. For this, I'm going to go to a browser-based connection, and I would connect. And boom, you're in what's seemingly just a VM, right? So I hope that helped add some context to what an EC2 instance is for you guys. And right now we're going to be moving to VPCs. So I'll see you guys when I get there. All right, so now we're back with VPCs. And I also want to make a little side note for you guys that when you're in doubt of what someone's talking about within AWS, number one, Google it. There's tons of white papers on it, okay? Definitely read up on white papers as you get a feel for what your newly applied to job is going to want to ask you during the interview, or what they're going to ask of you when you actually start at the company. but also you can just search in this search bar right here and most things will pop up, right? So I just search VPC, comes right up. Now, like I said, everything is going to have a pretty standard way of setting it up, and everything is going to have a role within AWS. So right here with the CIDR block, it's going to tell us, right? Say we put 28. That's going to give us a range of IP addresses that we can use within our virtual private cloud. Now, an issue you might run into, and I don't want to harp on this too much right now, but I do want you guys to be able to have something to say in the conversation if this would ever come up in a tech company that you're in. But if you have similar CIDR ranges between VPCs and you try to have them peer or talk to each other, you might run into an issue where a machine in those VPCs is trying to resolve to an IP address that another machine in another VPC you're trying to peer into is trying to resolve to the same IP. So it's just something to be cognizant of. And I think it's a good skill when you're going for your first interview to be able to talk about almost anything. Now, I'm not saying be an expert in it, but if a conversation comes up, whether it's at lunch, whether it's within your interview, whether it's with just small office talk, being able to talk about things and have a bit of knowledge, but then use that bit of knowledge to gain more knowledge as you go is an invaluable asset to your professional career in cybersecurity. So as we see here, IPv6 is not something you're going to have to worry about right now. Your specific company might use it, but for this video, you don't really need to know about this. There might come a day where we run out of IP addresses in the world, and we might have to switch to IPv6. But thank God that day is not today. We only have the coronavirus. Okay. So here you can name your VPC. So I'm just going to name it test, right? I don't recommend you typing in capital letters when you're in security engineering or code. Definitely type in lowercase letters, use underscores. But for this example, just do whatever, right? So for the public subnet IPv CIDR, this is going to be a little bit more difficult, right? So if you wanted to, you could type in 32, right? Because up here our CIDR range is 28. 32 is within that 28 CIDR range. Remember, as you go lower, the amount of IPs goes higher, right? So always be cognizant of that. Now, if you want to pick an availability zone, this is a much higher level preference that you can have in a VPC. But all this means is that within the US East 1 region, there's multiple availability zones for the resources that you're using within your AWS infrastructure. All that means is AWS has some sort of data bank or data center within the North Virginia US East 1 region that they can put your data on in case of an emergency, earthquake, any of these kind of things. These are all things that you need to think about when thinking about availability in security and security engineering in general. So we'll just pick 1A. You're not going to have to know what exact region or what exact town or city or whatever that availability zone relies in or is in, but it's just good to know it. We don't need to add any endpoints, and we can enable DNS host names, which means that DNS host names within this VPC are you can resolve them. Okay, so to explain subnets, I was trying to think of a good way to show it within the actual AWS console. And if it's something you want to see, then all you have to do is go to VPC, or you can just type in subnet, either or. But you can come to subnets, and it has a pretty easy to use create subnet wizard. But I think that doesn't do it justice, right? So let me zoom in on this a little bit here. So this is just a simple tool, draw.io. And if you become an architect or anything that has to do with AWS, you might want to familiarize yourself with one of these tools because they help explain architecture very well. Now this shield down here would be our subnet. They actually don't have a logo that I can find for subnet, so we're just going to think of this as a subnet, okay? So here, up here we have our VPC, which in reality would encompass this entire thing, but for the sake of drawing, we're just going to write it this way. So traffic would flow in from your VPC, it would hit an IP address here, right? Then the route table that's within the VPC would route it to the correct subnet that has the public IP address, right? Or it has the internal IP address from the public IP address. So here's your VPC. Here's the traffic flowing in. Here's a subnet, right? Over here would be another subnet in the same exact VPC with another EC2 instance or many flowing the same traffic, right? So these subnets themselves, what am I doing here? These subnets themselves, hold on, we have an issue. We have an issue. What's going on? There we go. Okay. That's very clunky, but you guys get the point. I'm not an artist, I'm an engineer, okay? I don't get to be good at everything, okay? I'm barely good at engineering. So these T2 boxes that you see here are your EC2 instances. So they're your computers essentially, right? In the cloud. This VPC is a virtual private cloud like we talked about before. And within that within it, not adjacent to it like these, within the actual virtual private cloud are subnets. Subnets are essentially their own private cloud that is publicly addressable, right? So within those, you have your computers, you can have infrastructure, and this is the basis in which you want to set up your beginning architecture for AWS on. And the point of this is these two subnets can talk to each other, but I need to give them permission to. This keeps everything in your infrastructure segmented so that it's naturally secure, along with security groups and other things that we're going to talk about in later videos.
So I hope that video was informative to you guys that are just trying to get into security engineering or just security in general. Either way, I think you're going to have a great use of AWS or Azure or any cloud service. But mainly, I think the most common one is AWS. If there's anything that you can take away from this video, it's just to be curious about what you're learning here. I know it's very basic. Some people might say it was too basic, but I think the fundamentals of engineering and of cloud architecture are what is going to help you build on top of that to become a great engineer or a great SecOps specialist, anything like that. If I could give you one exercise to do while you're offline here or while I'm offline, is take exactly what I showed you in there, no matter how basic it might be. Create your own infrastructure with the free tiers that you're allowed by Amazon and send a picture of it in the Discord when you get done with it. Add some stuff to your virtual machine or your EC2 instance, as AWS calls it, and play around with it on there. It's essentially just a free virtual machine. You can't really go wrong with what you put on there. You can't really break anything. Okay, if you do, just reverse the snapshot. It'll come right back. So I hope you guys have a great night. Happy sec engineering, happy cloud engineering, happy hacking. I'll see you guys later.